We are all slaves to something. What are you a slave to? And what does true freedom really mean? Today we are going to explore this question through one of the best animes I've seen in a very long time. And you will learn that the key to escaping this universal slavery lies in decoding the core message of the series: that no one has enemies. Welcome back to the channel, my name is Enric and this is the philosophy of Vinland Saga. Very few animes have moved me this deeply or made me think this hard. If you haven't seen it, consider this first a spoiler warning, and second my personal recommendation that you set aside a few hours to watch it because you won't regret it. Let's get started.
The saga of Otaku Enric continues.
Vinland Saga begins by introducing us to Thors, a Viking warrior whose skill in battle has made him legendary. Thors embodies the ideal Viking, a fearless warrior whose sword cuts down enemies as if they were made out of butter. But despite having reached the peak of what his people consider human excellence, Thors moves across the battlefield with the cold gaze of someone who is empty inside. Until, in a moment of clarity, he decides to desert and flee from war with his wife and newborn daughter, leaving the warrior's life behind in search of a place where something better can be built. Years pass and Thors manages to build, almost at the edge of the world, a small community where people live in peace and harmony. His past, however, still lingers in his life like a ghostly reminder of who he once was, because despite all his efforts to inspire a new way of thinking and living in others, the young, in their ignorance, remain fascinated by the Viking ideal, playing at being warriors who destroy their enemies and even getting excited at the idea of going to battle. In fact, one day Thors discovers his second son, Thorfinn, who is about 6 years old at the time, trying to steal a dagger from him, and he tells him some words whose meaning Thorfinn will take nearly a decade or more to truly understand.
Do you want a sword, Thorfinn? A sword is a tool meant to kill. Why do you need it? Whose life do you intend to take?
Enemies.
Your enemies? Who are they?
Well, bad guys like Halfdan.
Listen to me, my son. You don't have enemies. The truth is that nobody has them. Nobody in this entire world deserves to get hurt.
No one has enemies. This is the lesson Thors has drawn from his experience with the cruelty of war, very much in line with the best of ancient Stoicism. Compare it, for example, with this passage from Marcus Aurelius. In the gymnastic exercises, suppose that a man, by dashing against thy head, has inflicted a wound. Well, we neither show any signs of vexation, nor are we offended. And yet we are on our guard against him, not however as an enemy, but as an antagonist. Something like this let thy behavior be in all other parts of life. Let us overlook many things in those who are like antagonists in the gymnasium. For it is in our power, as I said, to avoid the punches and to have no anger nor hatred. It is possible to defend oneself, to avoid the blows, without hating the one who attacks me. It is possible to see them simply as an antagonist to stop, not as an enemy to hunt down, harm and destroy. Thors spends his youth thinking that being brave means charging fearlessly at the enemy, but he eventually realizes that true courage lies in going against the current and stepping away from that absurd system in which complete strangers irrationally kill one another simply because two kings who don't even know each other have something against one another. The truth is that at a fundamental level we are all the same. And that's why no one has any enemies, and no one deserves to be harmed. Begin the morning by saying to thyself, I shall meet with the busybody, the ungrateful, arrogant, deceitful, envious, unsocial. All these things happen to them by reason of their ignorance of what is good and evil. But I, who have seen the nature of the good that is beautiful, and of the bad that is ugly, and I who know that the nature of him who does wrong is identical to mine, I can suffer no harm from this person, for no one can rob me of my honesty. That's why I cannot be angry with my kinsman, nor hate him, for we are made for cooperation, like feet, like hands, like eyelids, like the rows of the upper and lower teeth. No one deserves to be harmed. But Thorfinn is still too young to understand this, and besides, things are about to change. The Vikings discover that the legendary Thors is still alive and summon him to a new war, threatening to destroy his village if he refuses. Cornered, Thors complies and sets sail with a small group, unaware that his son Thorfinn has secretly snuck aboard. Halfway through the journey, they are attacked by pirates, and suddenly those young men so eager for war and glory begin to tremble with fear at the prospect of dying. Thors decides to face the pirates alone bare-handed, determined not to kill anyone, and ends up challenging their leader, Askeladd, to a duel. Thors wins easily, but when the Vikings threaten to kill his son, he chooses to give up his own life, making Askeladd promise to let the others go unharmed. Thors is riddled with arrows in front of Thorfinn, yet he dies without even falling to the ground. Askeladd and the pirates continue on their way, only to discover that Thorfinn has once again snuck onto their ship, swearing eternal hatred against them.
Cowards! How dare you! How dare you take a warrior like my father! I'm gonna kill you for that! I'll be the last thing you see! I'll kill you! Do you hear me? I'm gonna kill you!
Consumed by the desire for revenge, Thorfinn one day approaches Askeladd's bed to kill him in his sleep, but he can't bring himself to do it. Killing an enemy from behind would be shameful, he thinks, and it would disgrace his father. So he strikes a deal with Askeladd. He will enter his service, helping the pirates in their missions, in exchange for the chance to duel him again and again until he becomes strong enough to kill him and take his revenge. Thorfinn spends years in Askeladd's service, becoming more and more skilled in the art of killing, while at the same time sinking deeper into the pit of hatred, resentment, and revenge, staining his hands with the blood of countless nameless fathers, all for the sake of avenging his own. And this is where the first lesson of the series comes in. We are all slaves to something. It is Askeladd who delivers this message, as he watches the pitiful sight of a man beating his slave.
See that? Pretty terrible, isn't it?
It's time that you accepted you're a damn slave!
A slave to money holds a whip, just so he can act like he owns a slave bought by money.
How dare you!
But he's not aware of one thing. The truth is, all of us are slaves to something.
This echoes the teachings of another Stoic, Epictetus, who himself was a slave in Rome. He is free who lives as he likes, who is not subject to compulsion, to restraint, or to violence, whose pursuits are unhindered, his desires successful, his aversions unincurred. But who lives like that? No one. One is a slave to money, another to fame, another to their beloved or lover, another to other people's opinions. Even the most powerful person lives bound by multiple external and internal factors that chain their will. This recalls the famous episode in which Alexander the Great, the conqueror of all Greece, went to visit the philosopher Diogenes, who lived on the margins of society in a barrel. Alexander admired him, approached him, and said, "Diogenes, ask me for whatever you want, and I will give it to you." And Diogenes, the only truly free man in all of Greece, replied, "Well, I want you to step aside because you are blocking my sunlight." Those who were present were scandalized. But Alexander turned to them and said, "Don't be scandalized. If I could choose, I would want to be Diogenes." Alexander the Great himself, the most powerful person in all of Greece, felt less free than Diogenes, the least powerful. And that's how it is in the world of Vinland Saga. Everyone is a slave to something. Even the one who should be the freest of all, the king, is a slave. He is a slave to the crown, which drives him to become the worst of men just to keep it. Since then, neither they who are called kings, nor the friends of kings, live as they like. Who then, after all, is free? The slave owner is also a slave, as Hegel would later rightly point out in the 19th century. The slave depends on the will of his master, and, out of fear, cannot do or say what he truly wants. The slave depends on the will of his master, but by the same token, the master depends on the slave's labor, and is enslaved to him, because without that labor, he can achieve nothing.
Well, I'm only a slave to my incredible intelligence.
By the way, if you are enjoying this video, give it a big like, because it really helps me bring Vinland Saga and its philosophy to many more people. And tell me in the comments which anime I should watch and analyze next. Honestly, I trust your recommendations a lot now. Thorfinn is also a slave, even if he can't see it. In fact, at the very moment Askeladd says we are all slaves to something, the camera lingers on Thorfinn, who is suffering alone outside in silence, cut off from everyone else. A slave girl approaches to bring him his dinner, and they strike up a brief conversation.
Are you a slave too?
Huh?
I mean, you're eating out here, so...
I'm a warrior, which means unlike you, I have a choice in deciding where I eat.
Really? But still it seems like you and I are actually quite similar.
Here lies the paradox. Thorfinn is supposedly free, freer than the slave girl, because there is nothing tying him to Askeladd or the pirates. If he wanted, he could turn his back on them and go home, where his mother and sister would welcome him with open arms. And yet, no matter how free he is to choose where to eat, he is incapable of making the truly free decision, leaving Askeladd behind. Paradoxically, in his freedom, he has become a slave to hatred and revenge. His entire life now revolves around killing his father's murderer, and for that very reason, Askeladd is able to use him as a tool in his plans, like a slave dangling before his eyes the carrot of an opportunity, always one more opportunity to avenge his father's death in exchange for some kind of service. Nothing visible binds Thorfinn, and yet he's enslaved by invisible chains. Thorfinn is not master of himself, and worst of all, he doesn't even realize it. It is Askeladd who is his master. Thorfinn is not master of himself. A recurring theme that fits perfectly here in classical philosophy is the slavery of the passions. We find it in Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, and the great Stoics. Human beings find themselves at the mercy of a whole range of inner reactions that often drag us where we don't want to go, far from our happiness. In contrast, true freedom consists in achieving self-mastery through virtue, rising above this inner turmoil that enslaves me and moving forward with steady steps towards the good that reason shows me. Today, I have freed myself from all kinds of complications, Marcus Aurelius writes. Or rather, I cast them off because they were not external to me, but lived within me, in the judgments I made about things. But Thorfinn has no one to teach him how to do this, and left to his own devices, he sinks deeper and deeper into that inner slavery in which he himself is his own oppressive master. Until the ground gives way beneath his feet when a completely different person, Prince Canute, kills Askeladd, snatching away the revenge he had desired his entire life. Suddenly, holding his dying enemy, Thorfinn realizes that what had given meaning and direction to his life is slipping through his fingers. And with his final breath, Askeladd throws him the Socratic question.
Tell me, how do you intend to live? From this day on, long after I've rotted away, how do you intend to live your life, Thorfinn? Something tells me you haven't even thought about it till now.
Thorfinn had no plan other than killing Askeladd. He went as far as descending into hell to achieve it. And now that someone else has done it, he realizes it was all in vain. All that time, all those deaths, all those betrayals, all that blood, for nothing. After a series of events, he ends up as a slave on the farm of a wealthy man named Ketil, who promises to restore his freedom in exchange for several years of service. But stripped of the meaning of his life, the only reason he had to go on living, Thorfinn succumbs to the nihilism Nietzsche speaks of after the death of God. When, having unhooked the earth from the sun, suddenly there is no up or down, no direction at all, and everything drifts in the most absolute void where nothing matters anymore. He has become an empty shell, a walking dead man with no taste for life at all, allowing himself to be abused by those who despise slaves.
But why? Why is it we have to be so afraid of death? Are we only alive because we don't want to die? I wonder, does something good ever come from living? Because there's nothing for me. In all of the days I've lived, nothing good has ever happened to me.
Little by little, however, thanks to the friendship of other slaves like Einar and Arnheid, Thorfinn realizes that if he is willing to accept them, many good things still await him in being alive, and so he recovers his taste for life. In an act of courage, he decides to leave his past mistakes behind, forgiving himself for his sins and becoming a new and reborn man. Someone who might deserve to be freed from slavery. Slavery has also always been a recurring theme throughout the history of philosophy. Aristotle, for example, distinguished between the slave by convention and the slave by nature. The former, he thought, is someone who is born free but ends up a slave, for example, after losing a war. But beyond this, he claimed that some people were born to be slaves. Their nature was such that they could not be free. They were destined to submit to the will of a master. There is an episode in the second season in which one of the farm owners explicitly rejects this Aristotelian theory of natural slavery. No slave was truly born to be one. They were simply unlucky, and the same thing could happen to anyone, any day.
Don't you feel sorry for Arnheid and Garter? Well, don't you, Snake? There are some who say that slaves only become slaves if they are naturally inclined to do so, because they are inferior, that they're just the right ones for the job. But not me. I don't believe that to be true. Those who became slaves didn't have any luck, and that's all there is to it in the end. You know, if you and I didn't have any luck, then we could have been slaves as well.
This idea is crucial because if all slaves are slaves by convention, then slavery exists only because we choose for it to exist, in which case, if we all agreed, we could eliminate it for the same reason. That may seem obvious to us, but only because we stand on a long history that came before us. Not that many centuries ago, it was anything but obvious. In reality, it took a lot of philosophy and the spread of that Christian idea that we were all created equal in the image and likeness of God to finally untangle Aristotle's perverse idea that there were inferior human beings who were naturally slaves. But at this point, Thorfinn begins to dream of a new world where war and slavery no longer exist. And that's when he finally understands his father's lesson. No one has enemies. No one deserves to be harmed. If he wants to make that ideal place real, to prove that living is better than dying, violence cannot be the first tool for solving conflict. So, when war reaches Ketil's farm, Thorfinn goes to speak with Canute, now the king, to try to convince him to withdraw, even though he has every advantage. But Viking soldiers block his way, threatening to beat him to death. Thorfinn makes them a deal. If he can withstand 100 punches from the strongest and most savage of them all, they will let him pass to speak with the king. They laugh right in his face, but 100 punches later, all that laughter turns into a silence filled with respect. And to earn it, Thorfinn didn't have to throw a single punch. He's just shown them that the Viking ideal of violence is powerless in the face of a better ideal, the true warrior. Why didn't you hit back? They ask.
Well, that's a dumb question to ask, isn't it? It makes no sense to beat someone when you're trying to negotiate for peace. Especially since I just met you guys today. We don't know anything about each other. I have no grudges against you. So why? Why do we have to fight? It's absurd. The only people that should be fighting are Ketil and King Canute. The leaders should be playing Nefertofel, not us. We should be the ones settling their quarrel. Because there's absolutely no reason for this many people to shed their blood. It shouldn't be us. We've just met each other. And that means no one here is my enemy. Because I have no enemies.
I also have no enemies. I destroyed them all.
Vinland Saga has been a wonderful surprise, and I highly recommend it. Another anime that surprised me with its philosophical depth is Code Geass, which I already talked about in this video right here. So click it to see the confrontation between Kant and Hume turned into anime, and you will also discover which completely unknown philosopher is behind its incredible ending. I will see you there, thanks so much for being here, and above all, don't forget to think.